Hi, I'm Alban from SkyGuild, and in today's video we want to talk about my 5-color artifact, aggro control or robots list. This includes the history and ideas behind building it, certain strategies, general strategies, specific strategies, and also card choices. Before we dive into it, I want to thank you so much for your positive feedback on my last video where I talked about my blue-white Lions deck I won the NoobCon 2018 with. So, as last time, if you have any questions, comments, or ideas, additional ideas, just write in the comment section below on our site, Facebook site, SkyGuild. So let's dive right into it. Here you have seen the list. The general idea behind it was to build a deck which follows the same rules as my Lions deck did. So that means my main goal behind building any of my, let's say, tier 1 decks or really competitive decks is always to reduce luck or variance and to increase skill to a maximum possible, okay? That means my idea is not to play a deck which is fully relying on aggro strategies, like where you burst out your full hand and then maybe you're out of gas at a certain point. On the other hand, I'm not a big fan of decks like the deck where you fully rely on control strategies, just killing with Mishra's Factory or Fireball either. So, yeah, basically the idea, which is the same as with the Lions deck, was to build a deck which is fully convertible, which means you can transform it into anything you need. If you're playing against a more aggressive deck, you can transform this deck into almost the same list as the classical D deck, okay? On the other hand, if you play against more control-ish decks, you can convert it into a more aggressive approach with the Sushis, with the Triskelions, and therefore you also have the 2 Serra Angels. I will talk more about those later. You have those as additional pressure against control mirrors. So basically, as I talked about in the Lions video, the idea is that you adapt to your opponent's strategy instead of playing your own game, which allows you to create more spots to outplay him or her with your skill. Which means this deck's main strategy, the same way as the Lion deck, is that if you are the better player, you can outplay your opponent in many smart spots, in many interesting and smart spots. So if you look closer, basically this looks a little like the deck, because you have the core control shell of counter spells of Sword Supplosion, Disenchant and Balance, plus Mishra's Factory and the Fireball as killing option, and you play also the Abyss, plus the usual restricted cards, which are pretty strong. But what is different? The main difference here is that instead of playing the full control package with especially Jane Day tomes, in this deck you play the same engine as a robot aggressive deck, okay? Which means you play Suchi, you play Triskelion, and you play Copy Artifact. Okay, so you have at least the chance of creating a board position where you win the game pretty fast with a fast ramped Suchi plus Copy Artifact and so on. So you're basically exactly in the middle of playing the deck and playing an artifact robot aggro, okay? This strategy is further supported, of course, with the Mishra's Workshop here to create more spots in which you can burst out pretty quickly. So I played around quite a while with a pretty similar deck, which was just white, blue, and black, however, which relied more on the Copy artifact and the artifact creature engine, missing though the regrowth and the fireball. Then, and I have to give him credits for that, I have seen that list, which was pretty similar to what I was brewing before in my mind. This is the list of Jesper Icing, also from NoobCon 219. And as you can see, he also experimented with a robot list, which includes 5 colors. However, if you look closer, he plays more one-offs, for example, a Tawna's Coffin, or just 3 Suchi, 3 Triskelion, and let's stuff like a Transmute Artifact or the Draw 7s. This is all stuff I don't play. But basically the idea behind my list was to create the approach to play 5 colors with the 3-color artifact aggro control I brewed before. So in the end, what I tried is to optimize Jesper Icing's list. For example, I think the Draw 7s are not really good because you're not really heavy aggressive, which means you remove your opponent's stuff with Swords to Plowshares, with disenchants, with counters. So you empty his hand, you counter all his threats. The last thing you want to do is to refill his hand through Wheel of Fortune or Time Twister, basically. And you don't play any lightning bolts, chain lightnings, or fast burn either, nor Black Vice. So literally there is no need to refill ever an opponent's hand, in my opinion, in such a kind of deck, okay? Moreover, I'm not a big fan of one-offs like Tawna's Coffin or Transmute Artifact in this case, so I usually try to minimize the variance as good as I can, which means instead of playing one-offs, I try to, for example, play the full playset of Suchis, or to rely more on on things I can constantly draw, for example. I mean, I'm not saying those cards might not be interesting, especially if you consider there is a slight combo or a little combo with Tawna's Coffin and Triskelion, where you like exile the Triskelion and then you bring it back with new, and you can shoot again at your opponent's face and whatever. So this is basically the list. The final list I played at quite some tournaments, and I was pretty successful in it as well, hitting several top 8, top 4s, and whatever, Fish Liver Cup, Arvika Festival, and whatever. So you can check those out. But now, what's the main strategy? As I told you before, you have those creatures, plus the Fireball, plus the Mishra's Factory as winning options. And very important, the sideboard consists of 4 Divine Offerings, which are very, very important. I cannot stress this enough. Like, Divine Offering in nowadays meta is for me an auto-include 4 times, because there are so many people playing and then abusing artifact strategies, which is even more true in the Eternal Central meta. I mean, I just play Swedish meta usually, but especially when you're allowed to play 4 Mishra's Workshops, this is even more crucial, because people hardly abuse those Mishra's Workshop, and they play Triskalavos or 4 Triskelions and whatever, and you just need those 4 extra artifact removal to be competitive, especially since you gain the life through it. Even against Black Vice strategies or Ankh of Mishra or whatever, a few extra life, they can be really, really crucial in some games. At least that was the case for me. So then the typical stuff you also see in my Lions deck, the 2 Maze of Its, the Blue Blast, the Circle Red, of course 2 Red Blasts as well, since you can play red with 4 City of Brass. And those, most important, those 2 Serra Angels, they're really crucial. One might think, okay, Serra Angel plus the Abyss, why does he play that? I mean, that's a no-go, right? But in fact, whenever, that should be kind of obvious, but I still say it again, when you board your Serra Angels inside, of course, the Abyss always goes out. The Abyss is really, really useless in many matches where your opponent supports a control strategy as well, or has no creatures at all, or plays artifact creatures, so whatever. Now let's get into a detail. This deck here, why is it so strong in my opinion? It's so strong, as I said before, because it can adapt to anything. And in my opinion, it is especially strong against the deck with Jayemdae Tomes. I think my overall tournament score, playing tournament rounds, was like 8 wins and 2 losses, or even 9 wins and 2 losses against the deck, which is so a really, really positive statistic. And that is because what you're doing against the deck is boarding outside the Abyss, boarding outside the Swords to Plowshares, all point removal since he doesn't play any creatures, and also maybe 1 lanes or so, because you don't need all the lands. So usually I board out against the deck. Let me count again. 4 Swords to Plowshares, 2 Abyss, 1 Plains, and maybe also the Balance. I'm not sure anymore, but you can decide. And what I board inside is 2 Serra Angels, 3 Blue Blasts, and 2 Red Blasts usually. And those Divine Offerings as well. So basically, the main strategy is that you have the same restricted cards. Many games you will win nevertheless with the usual suspects like Ancestral Recall, Mind Twist, or Library of Alexandria. But moreover, if a game is not, or a round is not decided by those typical cards, what you want to do is to put so much pressure on your opponent playing the deck with Suchis, with Triskelions, with Serra Angels, countering his threats, that in the end, he has less counters than you do, and less removal, because he had to use all his resources to clear your creatures, that in the end, you win with a single Serra Angel or Fireball he cannot counter anymore, because he already shot out all his bullets before, you know? So you create more threats, and in the same way, the only real threat he has opposed to you, which you don't play, is the Jayemdae Tome. And for the Jayemdae Tome, you really prepare it very well, because you play 4 Disenchants, and after boarding, also 4 Divine Offerings. On the other hand, against every control strategy, let's say 8 Torgalists, or whatever, Arabian aggro, or blue-red aggro, you can transform this deck exactly into a deck just missing the Jayemdae Tomes. Which means I almost get against every single deck, which is more aggressive than mine, I remove the full artifact package, which means I remove all 4 Suchis, I remove the 2 Triskelions, I remove the Workshop, and I remove the 2 Kobi artifacts, which is 9 cards in total. And then, depending on the matchup you're playing against, for those 9 cards, you could put inside the 4 Divine Offerings, 2 red, circle red, red blast, Maze of Ith, blue blast. Everything but the Serra, basically. So, in the end, as you can see it, you adapt to your opponent's strategy, transforming it into an artifact aggro or the deck. What can I say more about this deck? Maybe some little changes I made recently. This is the list I played quite a long time, but right now I experimented a bit, because I realized that the 2 Triskelions, they felt a little clunky in many matches, especially playing against Black Vice, because what is a clear disadvantage of this deck is playing 4 City of Brass. I usually hate playing more than 2 copies of City of Brass, because the self-damage against aggro can be super crucial, and you don't really want to get that extra damage, especially if you have 2 or 3 copies the same time of the City of Brass. So, exactly, those Triskelions under Black Vice, under Ankh of Mishra, they often felt so clunky, and I didn't really use them so well, because they often felt like winning more. I mean, they were pretty good in rounds and in games where I already won, or it felt like I already won. And on the other hand, when I lost, they were, yeah, even worse, you know? So they didn't really fulfill the role I wanted them to. Maybe change a game when you top deck them and then you turn the game around, let's say, you know. And they never really fulfilled that role. So my approach was to think about how to make the deck a little, little thinner, a little more versatile, to be able to burst out my hand when I need to under Black Vice, for example. So my approach for now was, I mean, the deck list is not online on Sky Guild so far, but eventually when I have my final list, I will upload it, as well as 2021 version of my 5-color artifact deck. My approach was to remove the 2 Triskelions and to replace them with Copy Artifact, because Copy Artifact is just so incredibly strong. Because usually the spot where you copy your Triskelion almost won't happen, which means Copy Artifact 90 to 95% in all rounds I've ever played copies either my Sushi or a Mishra's Factory, or in some cases, when your opponent cannot disenchant or shatter it, whatever, you have a second Chaos Orb as well, which is pretty strong. So I'm experimenting with 4 Copy Artifacts right now, which means 4 Sushi, 0 Triskelion, 4 Copy Artifacts, and so far it feels really good, I have to say. The other change I might be experimenting it is, if you play those 4 Copy Artifacts and 0 Triskelions, of course the Mishra's Workshop, is less useful. Because it can be still strong with a Mox to ramp out a Sushi, but that spot just happens much more rarely than when you play the Triskelion. So I might consider to stabilize the mana base a little more and to be a little less dependent on City of Brass in some spots, to remove the Mishra's Workshop as well and to play, let's say, a Scrubland, which would basically be the same as in my Lions deck then. So this is something you could experiment with. I'm really curious about your feedback. That's it so far about the main strategy and main idea behind this deck. I really hope you enjoyed that video too. Please leave me your feedback and questions, as I told you before, right in the comments section, just on Sky Guild. So if this is somehow linked on some other site or Facebook groups, please go to our site Sky Guild, because just there I will read the comments and be able to respond. So see you guys soon again, and have a nice day. Bye bye.